Why victims stay. The issue I would like to discuss in this audio is why do some victims keep going back to their abusers? It is not as simple as leaving when you are in an abusive relationship, and there are several reasons why a victim may choose to stay in one. This video is strictly my personal opinion and based on my observations as a family law attorney in the greater Houston area. I have had countless conversations with the victims and abusers. I have also read a lot of training material on domestic violence and applied much of it in my practice. This audio is not mental health advice and not to be taken as legal advice either. If anything, this is my mental impressions and personal opinions based on observations. Physical and emotional abuse is so pervasive that victims tend to develop an unhealthy addiction for the person hurting them. While many victims believe it is love, many others are hooked in by the intensity at which it starts. It comes as a brief glimpse initially, and that makes victims wonder if they were only imagining it. Most of them dismiss it and the warning signs. I would like to add that in my opinion, drugs, alcohol, debt, and our inability to acknowledge mental health issues can very well spike the stress levels in a relationship, which could possibly lead into abuse. I'm not justifying abuse, but only examining the question for purposes of trying to explore possible causes and ultimately why a victim might decide to stay or return to an abusive relationship. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have other videos describing the stress in the relationship and types of abusers. Okay, very often, victims will forgive their abuser for abuse and keep going back to their abusive relationships. Rather than demand that the abuser change the bad behavior, the victim will change themselves. Victims try their best to keep the abuser happy in the hope that the nice person will stay and the abusive side of the abuser will go away, which is one of the main reasons why they keep giving the abuser a chance. The good times give them this high and this hope. As the highs become fewer and further between and the lows more abusive, victims become addicted to chasing the high and hope more desperately. So here are some reasons why victims keep going back to the abuser even after the relationship becomes every bit abusive. Number one, they blame themselves. Abusive people target those with a low self-esteem and also those who have the propensity to see only the good in others. Such people are easier to manipulate. They also have a self-inflated sense of ego and they make themselves feel good. Narcissistic people see victims as an extension of themselves who are there to adore and obey them. I do not feel any need to dive too deeply into narcissism as there is already so much content on the web explaining and describing what this type of person is. Okay, moving on. Abusers want total control over others. They also need others to take the blame for their abusive behavior. Victims with low self-esteem easily believe that they are responsible for it. In the initial stages of the relationship, victims are hooked in by the abuser's charismatic side, and then the abuser starts to show the glimmer of that darker side. This is how the abuser gauges boundaries to see what the victim will and will not accept. After establishing the ground rules of the relationship, abusers then start to use tactics of gaslighting. This strips victims of whatever little self-esteem they have and it cements their control. When they feel that their partner might leave them, they start to do everything to get them back. It becomes hard for victims to shake that belief. Abusers make victims feel guilty for abandoning them like they are the only person who can change them. Okay, the second reason victims go back to their abusers is that victims are addicted to their abusers, and I'll explain why. The cycle of abuse comes with its own ups and downs. It leads to the development of an unhealthy addiction towards the abuser. It is not only the craving of a high, but it is much more complicated than that. It is a battle for control. Abusers want to control victims, and victims do not realize it at that time. Victims also have a need for control over the abuser. When abusers are abusive towards victims, the abusers feel in control, and when they are remorseful, the victims have control over the relationship. Victims believe that they can save the abuser. This feeling goes back and forth, and victims have a need to be needed and to be depended on. So maybe that was what I referred to as an addiction. It's just a need to be needed, a need to be depended on. It makes the victim feel special and wanted, which is why they keep giving the abuser a chance. The third reason victims go back is that they believe the abuser will change. All they need is for them to let them show them that they love them and to prove to them that they are worthy of their love. Abusers can bring their vulnerable side out, and the victim can see the abuser's damaged side. Nothing the victims do will fix them, but it is a hope that makes the victims stay even after the abuse. Now, in my earlier sentence, I used the words they, them, and their without distinguishing which pronoun referred to the victim and which to the abuser. I did this intentionally to show that the mutual and reciprocating hopes and needs are so co-interwoven at times. I will say it again. All they need is for them to let them show them that they love them and to prove to them that they are worthy of their love. Okay? The fourth reason victims go back is that they are scared of the future. The fear of the unknown is crippling, and it is terrifying to think of a future without the abuser. The thought of never seeing them can be unbearable, but the abuse in a relationship can make it impossible to stay in. It is also the fear of what others will think that can stop the victim from speaking the truth. Sometimes the fear of losing the abuser is more unbearable than losing the victim's own life due to abuse. This makes the victims go back to the relationship every time abusers apologize. Victims continue to believe that the abuser will change. Sometimes victims so badly want it to be true that they put up with anything only to stay in a relationship. Withdrawing from an abusive relationship is difficult, and a pullback to the abuser is intense. Victims want the pain to go away, but it also takes their self-esteem with it. Just one apology or a hug, and victims give them another chance. It is easier to do that than face the withdrawal of walking away. Victims need to be stronger, to believe in themselves, and to take a stand for themselves before thinking about anything else. As stated earlier, this video is strictly my personal opinion and based on my observations as a family law attorney in the greater Houston area. I have had countless conversations with victims and abusers. I have also read a lot of training materials in domestic violence and applied much of it in my practice. This audio is not mental health advice and not to be taken as legal advice either. If anything, this is my mental impressions and personal opinions based on observations. Thank you for your time.